Are you an aspiring print designer? Learn everything you need to know to get started in the world of print design in this course, The Basics of Print Design. In this course, you will learn everything from setting up your workspace and structuring your documents through to the basics of typesetting and choosing a color palette. You'll learn how to create an efficient workflow so you can find your rhythm and work quickly. Whether you're new to design or a seasoned digital designer who wants to get to grips with designing for print, this course is perfect for you. You'll learn the differences between Adobe InDesign and Affinity Publisher, so you can choose the software that's right for you. You'll then learn the InDesign basics you need to get started designing magazines, books, brochures, and more. In this course, you can look forward to learning how to use InDesign to set up different types of documents and create an efficient workspace. I'll also show you how to structure a basic document ready for layout, choose a good color palette, and set up your paragraph styles panel. Last, we'll explore type hierarchy and talk about creating impact in your layout. I'll show you how to keep the reader interested and engaged throughout a design project. We'll also touch on the pre-flight panel and all the different components you need to check before sending your file to print. So let's get started. Hi there and welcome back to this course. In this lesson, we will take a look at the differences between InDesign and Affinity Publisher. When it comes to page layout softwares, there are many in the competition. There are refined softwares that will let you combine typography, graphics, and photo into books, magazine publications, and flyers. But more importantly, a good software will let you typeset typography flawlessly. InDesign is the most popular software out, and it is subscription-based, which can get costly quickly if you're a freelancer who's just starting out, or if you're a student. Affinity Publisher, on the other hand, is a one-time pay fee for a single download, and you're not tied to a subscription. Affinity Publisher is from a company called Serif, and this is the third program released with designers in mind. Affinity Publisher has an extensive catalog of screen sizes to choose from, and you'll find anything including any of the iPhones and Apple Watch sizes to Kindle and Nexus. Affinity Publisher puts web design at the forefront, so you can design not only magazines, but also anything that's web-based. And this is because InDesign came out before web design was popular, so it was built on a different foundation. When it comes to speed, Affinity Publisher is faster, which makes a lot of difference if you're working from a laptop. So both software's interfaces look quite similar, and the same goes for functionality. If you use any of the other Affinity programs like Affinity Photo or Affinity Designer, Publisher might be easier to get used to. Affinity Publisher's interface is essentially the same as InDesign's, and the Tools panel is positioned on the left while the rest of the essential panels are docked on the right. The Pages panel is on the left side, which in a way is great as it gives you more room to open up other panels on the opposite side. There are a few options in Affinity Publisher that aren't easy to find compared to InDesign, or that take more steps to achieve. For instance, InDesign allows you to snap elements to be aligned, something that Publisher doesn't do automatically, but it allows you to have as an option. In that case, you will have to go into the menu and try to find it. The Color Picker tool in InDesign allows you to replicate not only color, but also text formats. And this is a huge time saver because it helps you work faster and efficiently. And if you're working with complex projects that include footnotes, then InDesign does a better job at that compared to Publisher. The Layers panel works a little bit different in Publisher. And this panel is essential in InDesign if you're working with either multilingual documents or creating templates. In Affinity Publisher, the Layers panel displays the objects of the spread you're currently working on and not the entire document. When it comes to text, Affinity Publisher supports most of the text options from InDesign, but when it comes to paragraph and character styles, Affinity Publisher mixes both of them into a single panel. One great advantage of Affinity Publisher is the ability to use Affinity Photo tools to edit images. So let's say in InDesign you have to open Photoshop separately. In Affinity Publisher, you don't have to do that. Tagged accessible PDFs have become even more and more popular now, especially in government-related publications, and Affinity Publisher doesn't really support that, so InDesign is still on top of that. So Affinity Publisher is a solid software if you're planning to use it to set up basic layouts or getting started as a freelancer, since it is budget friendly. InDesign is a subscription based, so it would end up costing more, but at the same time, it is highly developed and sophisticated. So if you're a devoted InDesign user, Affinity Publisher will look a bit clumsy until you're used to it. In my personal opinion, I prefer using Adobe InDesign because I started out using Quark Express about 15 years ago, and InDesign works perfectly for me in terms of creating layouts. It is also the most popular software, so when I need to share files with other designers or with a printer, I won't run into any big problems. Now that we've looked at the comparison of these two programs, we're ready to start with this course. In the next lesson, I will show you how to create a one-page document, a trifold brochure, and I'll walk you through the important components that you need to consider when setting up a new document in InDesign. I'll see you there. Hi there, and welcome back to this course, The Basics of Print Design. In this course, we'll start by showing you the essential elements you need to know in order to start a new document in InDesign. So let's start by setting up a magazine. Head over to InDesign and click on Create New. Here you will find all the different sizes of the documents that you worked on previously. And then here at the top, you'll find the print, web, and mobile options, and that will dictate the resolution that you'll be using for this document. So for example, for this specific project, we want to use print because we want it to be at 300 dpi. That's the print resolution. Web and mobile is 72. For this lesson, we will use A4, and here I'll change the name to preset 1. Change the units to whatever you're comfortable with. I am comfortable with inches and millimeters. And I'll just rename this to magazine, so that way we can just directly save the file. Set the pages to 5. Number of columns to 3. Here we can change the gutter to 0.25 inches. And the columns will be created within the margins that we choose here at the bottom. The gutter is the space in between each one of the columns. And these columns are useful because they can work as a grid, and it can help you set up your file in a more organized and clean way. Let's head down here. You can change the margins here, going up and down, and you can unlock or lock if you want to have equal margin size all around the page. Since I want only the top to be bigger, then I will unlock it and change the top and leave the other 3 as 0.5 inches. Bleed is a term used to describe part of your document that has images or elements that are touching the edge of the page. So these elements extend beyond the trim, and that extension is called a bleed. So when the magazine gets trimmed, you'll have no white margin around it. The norm is to have a 0.125 inches of bleed or 0.3 millimeters, and that should be just enough to avoid any white edges on your print. Always communicate with your printer because they'll tell you the right amount of bleed that you need. The slug extends to the bottom of the page, and this is used to add a title or a date to identify a document. And of course, we have the preview check here. If you check the preview, then you'll get a quick view of what the document you set up is going to look like. And if we're happy with that, we can click on Create. So let's move on to setting up a trifold brochure. In InDesign, select Print. I'll name this file Trifold Brochure. So what's going to happen now is we're going to take the size that we want the trifold brochure to be, the final size, and that will be the trifold brochure open. For this, you need the paper to be horizontal, and then measure the final width, and then divide it by 3. To that, add 1 millimeter to allow for the fold. So in my case, that would be 94.13 millimeters. And leave the height as it is. Uncheck facing pages. Number of pages to 6. We'll leave the columns to 1. Margins to 10 millimeter. Bleeds to 3. And if you want to save this document as a preset, head back up and click on the Save Document Preset button. So that way you don't have to be constantly setting this up again, over and over again. And then if you go to the Saved tab at the top, you'll have the preset already there. So click on Create. And now let's open the Pages panel. So we're going to create a new master page. And this new master will be slightly narrower to accommodate and compensate for the folds within the brochure. So set the width to 91, click OK. Right click on Be Master and select Apply Master. Make sure that Apply Master is set to Be Master and select 2 pages, 1 to 6. Click on Use Master Page Size and you'll notice that pages 1 and 6 are already looking a little bit narrower. So now we need to group panels 1 to 3, and that will be one side of the brochure, and panels 4 to 6 will be the other side of the brochure. To do this, head over to the Pages panel. On the main menu, deselect Allow Document Pages to Shuffle. And we will simply drag panel number 2 to panel number 1, and panel number 3 to 1 and 2. And the same for 4, 5, and 6. So the configuration that you should have is BAA and AAB. Panels 1 to 3 are the inside panels, and panels 4 to 6 are the outside panels. And now you're all set to design your trifold brochure. This last part is editing a page size, columns, margins, and bleeds. So what happens once you've already set everything up, and then you find out that maybe or you change your mind that maybe you want a little bit of margin on one side or less margins on another side. That's not a problem. You can still make changes on your document. So to change the margins and columns, head over to Layout, Margins and Columns, unlock Adjust Locked Content, and here you can modify things as you wish. The same goes for the columns and the gutter. And then you can click OK. And you're all set. If you want to make the changes on the whole document, you can do that by going to A Master and then make the changes there. To adjust the layout, head over to File, Adjust Layout. Here you can change the page size. And here you can also change again the margins and the bleed. So if we double the bleeds, you'll be able to notice it now when we click OK. There you go. And if you want to go back, press Command Z. And that's it for this lesson. Next, I'll show you 3 ways to create an effective workspace, where I'll show you how to set up your workspace in a way that it'll give you an efficient workflow. I'll see you there. Hi there, and welcome back to this course. In this lesson, we will show you 3 ways to create an effective workspace. Having an efficient workflow is really important when you're working on a big project. So in this lesson, we will take a look at the preference options, having the right panels open, and file organization. Let's get started. Many beginner designers don't know that there is a preference panel in InDesign where you can set up every single thing that can make your workflow more efficient. Anything from changing the units and increments, detailed typesetting options that can really help you make your work easier and streamline it. So in InDesign, head over to InDesign CC, Preferences, and click on General. So when you get a new computer and download InDesign, or let's say if you're starting at a studio, this is a great way to start because again, here is where you can set everything up the way you're used to working. For example, here under General, you can already change the way you edit an object or how you want the workspace to look like when you open InDesign. Under Interface, you can change the color of the background, how you want the panels to show up. Under Type, for example, triple click to select a line. Sometimes you'll double click to select a paragraph or a single word. So little things like this that really allow you to personalize how you work. Compositions, we have H&J violations, which is really useful to have if you are working with a lot of text. Ruler units. If you live in a different country, you might be more comfortable using inches or centimeters or millimeters. And then we have even more detailed options like size and lighting. If you are using your keyboard a lot to change the line space or the kerning and tracking, I usually like to have this at 1 point, the baseline shift at 1 point as well, and the kerning at 5. This just allows me to be even more detailed when I'm typesetting. So there are endless options that you can have here, and this is probably my favorite part, setting up my workspace. And of course, you can also change how your computer is working with InDesign. You can change the performance, file handling. So it's always good to take some time, take a look at these options, and tailor it to what you like and what you're used to working with. So I'll just make sure here that I have the units and increments set to centimeters and the page origin to page. So that way you can see how this works. I'll click OK, create a new document here. And you can already see that the preferences that we applied are already in the document. Now let's move on to setting up your workspace. If you go to the top right corner, you have a list of all the workspace that we have available within the software. So depending on what kind of project you're working on, if it's typography based, digital publishing, it will give you different panels for you to work with. So for example, we have the essentials, and this gives us the properties, pages, and CC libraries panels. We can change this to the typography workspace, and this will give us a totally different selection of panels. We have the layers, the pages, the links panel, and then we have a single panel here that is very much focused on typography. We have the paragraph panel, paragraph styles, character styles, glyphs, and of course you can move the panels around, and if you don't really use one of them, you can close it. And I like to base my workspace around the typography workspace. So I'll delete the ones or close the ones that I don't need and change the order in a way that benefits the type of projects that I work on. I'll head over here to the top right and select New Workspace. I'll put my name here, click OK. Let's close InDesign to make sure that when we open it, it is set to My Workspace. Create new document, and there we have it. We have My Workspace already set up. Now let's move on to file organization. File organization is one of the most important things that you can do for your projects. If you're either a freelancer or if you're working in a studio, you need to keep an organized workflow. So the first two that we saw, setting up your preferences and your workspace, that's very individual. But when it comes to file organization, you have to keep in mind that you might have to send these files to another designer. If you're working in a studio, there might be another designer that will be working on the same project as you. So here I'll start by creating a new folder on my desktop, and I try to keep my desktop as clear as possible. Ideally, you would have a system on how you name your files and how you keep them organized by date. So for example, for me, this project 1 would go under a specific folder, for example, Laura's Studio, and that's where this project 1 folder would go into. So we start with a folder, and I've already saved the files that we created on the last lesson. So we have project 1 magazine and project 1 trifold brochure. I'll move those two InDesign files into project 1. And then there are a series of folders that you should have under that. So you're able to keep all the linked files, the fonts, and everything else that you export. So for me, the most important are having a fonts folder. If you don't have a fonts folder for each project, then you should have a fonts folder for your computer. And that's where all the files should go for your fonts so they're not scattered around. Next, we need an images or JPEG folder. I like to call it images because sometimes I work with JPEG or TIFF files. This is great if you're linking a lot of images into an InDesign file if you're working on a magazine, so you know where all the images for that specific project are. Next, we need a PDF folder, great for when you export documents for your client. And then we need an old files folder. And then another problem that we have as designers is we need to have different versions of the same project. So if you are working or developing an editorial design layout, you will have different iterations and you will have different stages. As you communicate with your client, you might not need older spreads that you've designed, so you will need the newest ones. And then the question is how you keep those files. The way that I like to keep it is by naming them with versions. So V1 would be version number 1. And then let's say I went through a round of changes with a client. Then I'll create a version number 2. They gave me their feedback. Then I'll move version number 1 under old files and start working from version number 2. This is also great to keep if, for example, version number 2 crashes and then the file is damaged, then at least I have another version as a backup that I can work from and I don't have to start everything from the beginning. And another folder that I think is really good to have is notes or from client. Clients will usually make their changes on a PDF file. So you download that file and put it under notes or from client, and then you proceed to make the changes from there. And like I said, every designer has a different way of organizing this. You have to find something that works for you, but whatever that is, make it consistent because you don't want to lose any of these files. So now that we've looked at the ways to create an effective workspace, we're ready to move on to the next lesson that will help you to structure a document to create an amazing layout. I'll see you there. Hi there, welcome back to this course. In this lesson, I will show you how to structure your document. We will talk about master pages, how you can change the margins and the columns, how to overwrite masters, and how to organize your layers panel. So we'll start by setting up the master pages now. In InDesign, head over to the Pages panel and double-click on a master. And the first thing that you want to do if you're doing a magazine is to set up folios and page numbers. So using the text tool, I'll create a text box, right-click, insert special character, markers, current page number, and I'll just put magazine name here. I'll make this bigger so that way you can see it. And I'll duplicate it to the opposite page. So if we go back to our normal pages, you will see that each page now has a page number. Let's go back to a master, place this at the bottom. And now let's say that since the folio is at the bottom, I need more margin. And I want to change this on all the pages. So make sure that you are into the master pages. Head over to Layout, Margins and Columns. And here I'll show you something neat. I want all the margins to be the same, but in doing so, I want to adjust, let's say, the layout. So check the Adjust Layout option. You'll notice that the pages are disappearing because the text box is too small. So I want the font size to also be adjusted, and that will change automatically the font size. And you can also set up a font limit. So if you don't want it to go under a certain size, you can also do that. Here you can add or take columns out, and of course change the margins. And if you are not happy with that, you can hit cancel. But here we want to change the margins. So I'll go back here and set the margins to 30 millimeters and the bottom one to 40. I want the gutter to be 10 millimeters. Click OK. And the page number are looking a little bit too low, so I'll grab a guide. And I want it to be lined up to the margin. Make sure that you have the smart guides activated, and that will help you snap elements to be aligned. If you're working on a magazine, you might want to have a body copy text box and a headline text box set up. So go back to master. I'll duplicate this text frame. I'll have content here. Let's say I want 4 different boxes. Delete this content. And now let's go back to our normal pages, and you can see the outline here. Go back to a master. I'll lower the text boxes and add a headline text box. And before we move on, let's take care of our layers. So it's always useful to have a text layer, an images layer, and a background layer that you can hide and show and lock and unlock. So for instance, here I'll create a background. And if I head over to the normal pages, I can't really touch the background. And that's because it is under my master pages. So I can hide and show. Let's go back to a master and delete it. And you see that it's also deleted from the normal pages. So if you want to activate these text boxes from the normal pages and start adding content, press Shift, Option, and select the text box, and then you'll be able to start adding your own content. So here, for instance, fill with placeholder text. And because these text boxes are threaded, then the content will just flow. And the same for the following pages. Let's say you want to work with a dark background. For that, you need to change the color of the folio. So press Shift, Option, select the folio. Select the background layer, so you can add the dark background. And because the folio is under the text layer, you can change the color easily. Activate the rest of the text boxes, add content, and the same here, you can change the color of the text. Covers don't usually follow the same design as the interior pages, so we'll select everything, Shift, Option, select everything, and delete. And there you have it. That's how you set up the structure of a document. That's how you set up your master pages. You can change the margins, the columns, and adjust the layout to that. So now that you have the structure of the document all set up, we're going to move on into color palette. In the next lesson, I will show you 3 foolproof ways of choosing a color palette. I'll see you there. Hi there, and welcome back to this Basics of Print Design course. In this lesson, we will show you 3 foolproof ways of choosing a color palette. Choosing a color palette can take some time, but there are a number of tools that we can use to make this step a lot easier. So let's start with the first one is the color theme tool. This is a tool that InDesign added not too long ago, which is super useful. I've already downloaded an image from Envato Elements. You can just do so by going to Photos and selecting an image and downloading it. They have a great library that is always expanding, so for sure you'll find something there that you need. So let's grab the file, place it into InDesign. And the color theme tool is under the eyedropper tool. So hold a click there to open the other options, select color theme tool, and click on the image. And that's the easiest way to select colors. So you can already see how you have to choose a successful color palette. Ideally, you would need something that's very subtle that can work as a background, 2 medium light colors, 1 medium, and 1 dark. We have a button here to add these theme to swatches. I'll head over here to the swatches panel. And here I have colorful theme. The second way is the Adobe color wheel. So this works the same way as this was called before, Cooler. And basically you have all the different color harmony rules. You select the main color, so the rest of the colors are based on that specific one. And then you can move the color swatches around. And of course you have the custom one where you can mix and match as you like. You can save this to my library. Here I'll have Adobe Color 1, save, and it's ready to be used. Another option here they also have is extract from an image. So we'll drop the image here. And the neat part of this is that you can actually move the 5 colors that we have here. So we can either select a mood and it will show you where it exactly is grabbing it from. Or you can select none and move things around. And if we just quickly go back to InDesign, the color theme tool, if we click here on the arrow, it'll give us the same options as well, but not the one where it's custom, where you can move each color around. Next, we have the Explore page. And of course, here you can type a theme and you'll get a result for the different colors. So this is how you choose a color palette. You'll notice that 3 colors should be really the minimum that you need to have, because that will give you a range that goes from light to medium and dark. 5, I would say, is the most that you need, because then you're going to be struggling as to where you can use, let's say, the lightest shade or the medium shade. So I would say between 3 and 5, and something that ticks all the boxes, meaning light, medium, and dark. Now that we've covered how to create a color palette, in the next lesson we'll cover everything from type hierarchy to paragraph styles, basics of typesettings, and the do's and don'ts of composing a text. Hi there, and welcome back to this course, Basics of Print Design. Let's be real, type knowledge is so vast that we can talk about it for ages. And in this lesson, we'll cover 4 tips that you can use to make better typographic choices and to also have an easier workflow. We'll cover type hierarchy, how to pair fonts that make sense. I'll show you how to use paragraph styles, which can save you time and you'll work more efficiently. Let's take a look. Let's start with font pairings. Font pairings is one of those things that you have to train your eye in order to find something that works. And if you know the type categories, then that will make it a lot easier. We have some great articles at Envato that can help you learn more about the font categories. In essence, there are 4 to 5 groups of fonts. And if you head over to Envato Elements, they already have these categories on the left side when you're looking for fonts. So it's serif, sans serif, script and handwritten, and decorative. So if you're looking for something specific, you can check one of the categories and Envato Elements will filter that for you. You can also choose depending on the size that you're intending to use it. So the more you learn about typography, you'll know that display fonts are not meant to be used as body text because that will make it a lot harder to read. I've already chosen a few fonts here from each category, so I can better explain how to pair fonts. Addington is a serif font, which is better used for long forms of copy. Next, we have Sans, which is a sans serif. This font can also be used for text or for display. Next, we have Brochures Layer Duo, and this is more of a decorative font. So that is right, it is a sans serif, but at the same time, it can be decorative because it has different layers that add shadow to it. So display fonts, like I said, they're better used as a title, or if you're working on a restaurant menu, the name of the restaurant can go on this type of font because you're not using it in a long text, you're just using it for a few words. And the same goes for Brochures Script. So you could pair this with Brochures Layered. Of course, these 2 fonts are created by the same designer, so they do match. And it's great to have something supportive, either if you're using Brochures Layer Duo or Brochures Script. Addington and RNS Sans are a great pair because Addington is a very basic serif, very elegant and very readable, and RNS Sans is neutral. You could use RNS Sans as a headline and Addington as a body copy. Another great way to find great pairings is by going to Envato Elements and search for Font Duo. So some designers have already paired 2 fonts together. For instance, we have Jackson's Font Duo, which is a handwritten font paired with a sans serif. It looks very elegant, a little bit old school. And then we have Ripon, which is more feminine. It will look great as a magazine opener. So the trick here is to not use 2 fonts of the same category. So don't pair a serif with a serif. Try to pair a serif with a sans serif, or a sans serif with a script or handwritten. Next, let's take a look at type hierarchy. So typographical hierarchy is very important if you want the reader to know what to read first, what to read next, And it will also help you divide the information, how you want it displayed, and what you want the reader to read first. Here I have an example of type hierarchy on a magazine spread. So we have at the very top, we have the headline, and the headline should be the larger font size that you're using on a spread. The headline should be catchy, something with just a few words, not a full sentence, so that way the reader, if they're glancing over the magazine, they can just pick it up really quickly. Under the headline, we have the deck. The deck can be used to add a small introduction to the story. You can use a sans serif or a serif. Here, the deck is set at 30 points and the headline at 60. Under the deck, we have a credit line, and credit lines are great for giving credits to the author of the article and the pictures. And only if we can use 2 fonts on the article, we can still create something different that can stand out from the rest. So for example, on my credit lines, I prefer to use all caps because it's a way for it to stand out. But I'm also using it at 14 points, which is smaller than the deck, but bigger than the copy. Next, we have the actual body copy. In the body copy, I've set it to Addington at 9 points. I would say between 9 and 10, sometimes 8, depending on the font. 11 tends to be too big, usually. On the second column, I have a pull quote. Pull quotes are great to break some of the text. I've set this one at 24 points in extra bold. It is smaller than the deck, but still bigger than the copy. And width-wise, it still gives me a few words for it to be able to be readable. Because I don't want only one word on each line. I want a good amount of words that people can still read it comfortably. The purple frame on the second page can house a picture, and under it I have a caption. I used RNS Sans for the caption at 8 points. Sans serifs are very readable at smaller points, that's why I'm using it. And 8 points is not too small, but it's still a good size to house some information. So now that we have all of our type hierarchy on the spread, we can start setting up paragraph styles. Paragraph styles are a great way to work efficiently, especially if you're working with a long publication like a magazine. Once you learn how to work with paragraph styles, it will really help you get the job done quickly. So for instance, I have the spread here that I talked about in our type hierarchy, and I need to have my paragraph styles open. So head over to Window, Styles, Paragraph Styles. And since we have our type hierarchy already set, we can start working on the smaller details. For example, I want the headline to be set to title case. The deck, I want it to be on sentence case. I know I want the credits to be all caps. And I'll start setting up colors here. I want the copy to have the first line indented. Here I'll add some space before each line so you can see how it works with the baseline grid. So let's head over to InDesign, CC, Preferences, General. Let's make sure here that we can see the baseline grid. And here on the Preferences, I can change the start of the baseline grid to 0 at the top of the page. Click OK. And if we zoom in here, you will see all these little lines through the document, and that is called a baseline grid. Baseline grids are great to align the text, especially if you're working with different columns, so that way the lines of text are going to be the same across all columns. So let's select everything here. Let's head over to the paragraphs panel, and at the bottom, select the Align to Baseline Grid button. And you'll notice that every line of text will be aligned to a baseline grid. If you head over here to the top and change the space of the first line, you'll notice it doesn't move. The reason it doesn't move is because we chose that every line to be aligned to a baseline grid. So the algorithm of the program is going to ignore that change and only use the baseline grid option. But if you put it to 0, then now it's going to move. So you can see now every line on both columns is aligned. So now to continue setting the paragraph styles panel, I want to add a drop cap right here. A drop cap is used for the reader to know where the article actually starts. There's no rule as to what kind of style you need to have a drop cap. You can choose any style you want. You can get super creative. Okay, so we have everything set now. Open the character styles panel, and I want to set this character style before setting the paragraph styles. So select the drop cap, click on add new character style, double click, change the style name to drop cap. Here you can double check for the options in the settings. I'll click OK. And now let's head over to paragraph styles. The easiest way to do this is by selecting with the text tool, select the text that you want to convert into a style. Add a new paragraph style, set the name. It's always good to go through the options and check that you have the right settings. And since this is a drop cap style, head over to drop caps and nested styles. Select the character style to drop cap. We want it to take 4 lines in only 1 character. Click OK, and here let's just try it out really quickly. So click on this first line here, select drop cap, and it will instantly apply the style. Perfect. Now I need to set a regular copy. So click here, add a new style, copy. And you can continue to do the same for all the other elements. This is a great way, the fastest way to apply type hierarchy to all of the other articles that you will be working on. For example, here I will add some text and I can apply any of the paragraph styles to it. Another benefit to using paragraph styles is that if you want to change the style of the font or the size of the font, you can open the style and change the settings as you like. This change will only apply to the copy that you use the style in. And the last tip is basic typesetting. This tip becomes even more and more important the longer the publication that you're working on. If you're working with a brochure, you won't apply this as much, but if you're working on a magazine, a newspaper, typesetting is really important because then it defines how much text you can actually fit into one page. So for me, something useful to open is the info panel. So head over to Window, Info. Here we can measure the number of characters that it's in a line. So usually you would have between 70 and 80 characters in a line for it to be comfortable to read. Let's measure here a couple. And we have 70, 75. So the column width here is okay. It's not bad at all. The info panel can also give you the number of words, lines, and paragraphs if you select all of the text in this text box. When I'm typesetting text, I like to use the Adobe Single Line Composer. So what happens here is if you're using the Adobe Paragraph Composer, the software is going to use an algorithm to move the lines and to break the syllables in each word. For me, I prefer using Adobe Single Line Composer because it doesn't use algorithms at all. So it gives me more freedom to typeset the text. So for example, here I'll select a few lines and start tightening the tracking so I can fit more words or to get rid of some of the hyphenated words. Rule of thumb is not to have 2 hyphenated words back to back, so line to line. And also the goal is to not have a weird shape on the right side of the column because that can distract the reader and also it's not visually pleasing. A lot of designers prefer using the justify settings when typesetting a text. If you're using this, you need to pay attention to the H and J violations, which is the hyphenation and justification. And if you remember, you can set this up in your preferences panel. So if you have this option activated, it will highlight the lines that are violating the minimum and maximum space value. You'll notice that there is some yellow that is very faint and some of it that is really strong. So the ones that are really strong are the ones that are really stretching the values. So for me, those would be the ones that I need to fix right away. And a way to fix it is by either tightening the tracking But you will notice that in some lines, if you tighten it, then the word space is even tighter. So there are way too many characters in that one line. And when you get into even more detailed stuff, you will come across other problems like rivers, which is the wide gaps in between the words. You'll come across orphans and widows, and then you have to start fixing those things. Orphans are lines that begin at the end of a column or a page, and widows are the last line that appears at the beginning of the next column or page. So the longer your text is, the more important typesetting becomes, because you want your text to look visually harmonious and you want the reader to have a good experience and enjoy reading the text that you typeset. In the next lesson, I will show you the essential steps you need to know when importing images. I'll see you there. Hi there and welcome back to this course. In this lesson, I will show you the 3 essential steps you need to take if you're going to import images into InDesign. So let's say you have your layout ready to go, and now you need to start importing images. Many designers neglect this part, which is really a problem because if you are working on a magazine and have all the images already in there, send this PDF to your client and the client approves everything, but then you get a surprise after printing that the colors are not matching or they don't look the same. That's because we forgot to convert these images, or maybe they're pixelated. And that can get very, very costly if you have to reprint a whole magazine, a whole editorial project. I want to open this image with Adobe Photoshop. And the important part here is to check for mode. I want to transfer this from RGB to CMYK. So head over to Image, Mode, CMYK Color, click OK, and it's converted. Next, we want to check for the resolution. If you acquire a lot of images online, they will unfortunately be most likely 72 dpi. 72 is only for screens. If you want to print an image, it has to be at 300 dpi. This image is from Envato Elements, so they already know that we as designers take resolution very seriously, and that really dictates how big an image can go. So this is already set to 300 dpi. Of course, if we're using it for web, you can change this to 72, that's not a problem, and then the image size will go smaller, which is really helpful if you want to work with a lighter file. So let's put this back to 300 and add an _R. So for me, that's how I save all my files, _R at the end when I've already converted them to CMYK and 300 dpi. That means R for revised. Click Save. Back to InDesign. Make sure that you're selecting the file that is revised. Place it into InDesign and resize. Head over to the links panel, and here you will see some link info. And this is useful if you have already a ton of images into InDesign and you want to quickly check their color space and size. So here I can see that the format is JPEG, color space CMYK, perfect. Actual PPI 300. And then we'll go here lower and check on the scale. So the scale is 50%. That means that we're using the image at half its original size or half the size that it can actually be used. So if I want to make this bigger, the scale will change, and now I'm using it at 100%. You can also check that here at the top. Now let's say I make this bigger, and we can already see this getting slightly pixelated. An image can be used up to 120%. Ideally, you should keep it under 100, but you can use it up to 120%. So I want to go back to a couple of lessons ago where we talked about file organization. Another great advantage is that if you make any changes to the image that you're using in the file and it's properly linked, all the changes that you make on that image are going to affect it in the file. So for instance, I'll open the image in Photoshop. And let's say I want to change the color. And because we have a layer on top, I'll save this as a TIFF. So I'll put R version 2, TIFF, click OK, head back into InDesign, import the image there. So let's do our usual links check, CMYK, 300 dpi, 52%. And let's say that the client wants a different color. They didn't like the blue, they want a totally different color. I'll open the TIFF file, change the color, save it, close Photoshop, head over to InDesign, and you'll notice this warning symbol next to the image on the links panel. Double click on that, and the image will automatically update. So this is a great way to handle an image file, especially if you will be making retouches on top of that. So now that we've covered all the components that you need in print design, we'll touch on how to create impact in your design. In the next lesson, I will show you 5 ways to keep your readers engaged and interested in your layout. I'll see you there. Hi there, and welcome back to this course, Basics of Print Design. Now that we've covered all of the elements that you need in order to create a good print design project, it is time to get out of the box and explore a little bit. In this lesson, we'll take a look at a few ways to create impact in your design that will keep your readers engaged and interested. So first up is keeping it simple. So in the 1950s and 60s, the International Typographic style, or the Swiss style, came into full force in the graphic design world, and this style really made strong use of a grid, which allowed them to create really clean and organized designs. Not only that, but they were really impactful, and they gave us a really good visual break from all the noise that we would see around. So for instance, this 50th anniversary of the moon landing poster design heavily uses a grid to organize information and to place information. So that's the one good thing about using a grid structure. At the very top, we have the headline. And then at the very bottom, we have all of the information that we need. So for example, here is an exhibition. So on the last line, we have a description of the exhibition. And the second last line, we have all the information that people would need in order to attend it. In this poster, I used only one font, a sans serif, to keep everything classic and clean. And then I left the middle part for the actual graphic. And that's what I wanted the reader to look at first. I wanted them to be able to know what this poster was all about, which is the anniversary landing of the moon, and then head over to the headline, and then they could read the rest of the information at the bottom. So keeping it simple is not always just keeping it basic, because it will give us a good break from all of the other designs that we see around in the world. And this is something classic, traditional, and to the point. The second way to create impact in your design is by using full bleed images. If you're designing a business card or a brochure or a magazine, using full bleed images at a large size is a luxury. It causes so much impact, especially to a reader if they're going through a magazine and they come across a beautiful big image like this one that we have here of coffee grounds. You can use a full bleed image on a spread. Here I'm using it on one page, and the image is also crossing the gutter towards the second page. That gives us the opportunity to not only use an image either vertically or horizontally, but also give it a different dimension. Here would be a square. An image like this takes a lot of real estate when it comes to your magazine, but it also creates a bigger impact to the reader. So if you happen to be working with a great photographer who can supply great images, or if you are using Envato elements, take advantage of that and blow them out on your spread. Next step is layering elements. And now we're moving away a little bit from the classic design that we saw on the first example. When I was a beginner designer, I used to design everything very flat, and quickly I learned that there are many ways in order to create depth. Creating depth in your design will help it stand out more. So for instance, you can use drop shadows, highly textural images, but I still like the flat look and I prefer to layer elements. By layering elements, you also are allowing the elements to interact with each other and create a different kind of harmony, a different kind of texture that can really benefit your design. In this particular magazine cover, I used the name of the magazine to overlap the cover image. And then I chose to use white to contrast not only the background, but also the image that I'm using. I'm also using a sans serif font, which makes it even easier to read rather than using the style where it says the discovery issue, the handwritten style, or a serif. So you have to weigh the pros and cons and what kind of fonts you can use, what kind of colors you can use in order for it to still work. On the left side, I chose to rotate the text, and I chose to keep it simple as well, but give it a little bit of an edge. This is a great segue to go into the next tip, which is change type direction. So changing the type direction in your design can make it more dynamic and add more movement. Not only that, but you can also use type directions in order to direct the reader's eyes somewhere else. On this spread, I was using photos of people climbing. And when you climb vertically. So that was the inspiration behind using the vertical text. I used it on the left side as a sort of a title for the spread. And then I used it on the second page too. Also, I tried to mimic columns by creating two different text boxes. This particular spread was created for an experimental editorial design course. So we wanted to go all out. And even if it was created for a course, you have to keep the reader in mind. And last, we have go all out experimenting. So once you've learned all the rules of graphic design, it's good to get out of the box a little bit and experiment and try to develop your own style. There are so many ways that you can experiment by using Photoshop, by using a simple image, and just applying a ton of different effects to it. You can use analog materials where you can actually cut and paste things with your hands and collage and scanning them. David Carson was a big fan of doing this, of working with his hands. Chris Ashworth is another designer that not only works with grids, but also likes to experiment outside of that or experiment with the grid. For this particular poster, I used a font from Envato Elements that includes wider characters. So that was a great way for me to experiment with that and use something a little bit different than your usual normal width characters. For the background, I used the brush to create different colored diagonals. And this image is actually a statue where I turned it into black and white, and then I close cropped it and moved different squared shapes just slightly off. So it looks like there is a digital glitch on top of that. And then I added a little bit of noise on the background between the background and the actual image to create depth. You will notice that the layout of the information is quite basic. I have the title at the top, the location, and the different stages at the bottom, but I tried to spice it up a little bit by changing the direction of the type. Not only on the stages, but also on the very right where I have the date, the website, and the address. So you can experiment as much as you like. You don't have to go all out crazy, but just pushing a little bit of the boundaries every time you design something, it will allow you to grow as a designer. Now that we've covered all of the elements of design, it's time to jump into the printing section. So in the next lesson, we'll talk about the essential steps that you need to take in order to get your file ready for print. I'll see you there. Hi there, and welcome back to this course, Basics of Print Design. In this lesson, we will show you 4 steps you need to take to make sure your file is ready for print. Hopefully, this will help you avoid any errors that may come in the printing process. So let's take a look. The first step is checking for bleeding elements. When an image is touching the edge of a page, that's called a bleeding image. And in InDesign, a bleed guide allows us to take that image and extend it all the way up to the bleed. So when the project is printed, you won't have any weird white edge where the image is supposed to be. It works as a buffer. And for instance, here I have the orange background, and I want the orange background to be touching the bleed. And here I don't have a background, it's only white, so this is not necessary. So see this red line, that's the bleed guideline. We just need to make sure that all the elements are meant to be bleeding off the page are actually touching the bleeds. Number 2 is fix pre-flight errors. You'll notice here in the InDesign workspace, at the very bottom, there is a red dot and it says 1 error. You can double click there, and that will allow us to open the pre-flight panel. The pre-flight panel will let us know if there's any text overflowing, any images are missing, and any kind of error that our document could have. I have here overset text under text frame, and that's on page 13, so I'll click on that. It will take me directly where the error is, and it is in this text frame. So there are a couple of options to do here. If I have room, I can stretch the text box. If I don't have the room, and this is not real text, but if you're working in the real world, what would happen is you would go back to your client or your editor and ask them if they could maybe cut some lines or shorten the text in one way or another. Maybe you could use typesetting and try to condense things a little bit more and just try to make the text fit. But if you have more than one line, that can be a little bit difficult. In this file, we're just going to delete that, and then we have no errors. Next up is checking linked images. So I have all of my linked images here on the side. I have no errors, but I just want to show you what would happen if you're not organizing your files well, what could potentially happen. I'll move this file to the side, and instantly I'm getting an error. So links, missing link, page 1. So it's telling me that that link is missing. So this is why I encourage you to keep all of your images from that specific project in one place, so you know where to find them. So here I'll move the image back into the images folder, and it gets fixed instantly. And last is image sizes. So this is just to make sure that all the images that we're using in the project are not being used larger than they should. A neat trick here is to go to the links panel, select panel options, and select scale. And here we'll get the scale that we're using the images at. So you'll notice that everything is under 120, 130. We have one image at 121, which is the most I would stretch something. I wouldn't go over 120. Ideally, you should keep it under 100, but you can use it up to 120%. And that's it. These are the 4 steps that you need to take when you're sending a big file, especially a big file, to print. As long as you check the essential elements, your file is going to be printed okay. Of course, always double check with your printer. Make sure that when they're looking at the files, everything is correct. So now that we've checked for everything, in the next lesson, I will show you how to export a file for printing and how to package a file. I'll see you there. Hi there, welcome back to this course. In this lesson, I will show you how to export a PDF file for print and how to package a file. This is the last step we need to take in order to print our project. Head over to File, Export. And here what I want to do is change the file name to the correct name. So for instance, I'll take the prefix and leave it as Magazine Layout Design Course version 3. I want to save this in its respective folder. Format Adobe PDF Print, click on Save, and head over to Adobe PDF Preset. So depending on your printer, they'll ask you to save the file as a specific preset. Sometimes it's high quality print. I found that PDF X1A 2001 is the usual one. And sometimes it will be press quality. So always ask the printer what they prefer. I'll go for press quality. Export as pages. So this will be individual pages, and then the printers will make everything fit. Head over to marks and bleeds. Select use document bleed settings. Check crop marks, and that's it. Click on export. Wait for the bar here to be done exporting. Let's open the folder, PDF. And here I saved it outside of the PDF folder, so I just want to make sure that it's inside. Let's take a look. And here we have our single pages exported with the bleeds and the crop marks. You can see that on the side and the corners. So what's going to happen is the printer is going to take individual pages, for example, on a spread, and overlap them. So sometimes a PDF can look a little bit scary just because it has that extra bleed on the side, but there's nothing to worry about. Now let's talk about packaging a file. So packaging a file is a great way to finish off a project. You have your file, you have all of your images, you have all of your fonts, and at this point you probably won't need any of the old files that you created in order to get to the final design. This is also useful if you're a freelancer and you're doing a year in review where you're saving all of your files and putting them away on your backup hard drive. In order to package a file, head over to File, Package, and here we have a summary. So you want to make sure that there are no errors here. There are 13 fonts being used, links and images. We have 13 links found, 0 modified, 0 missing. And then it says 12 images are using RGB color space. So because this magazine was only used online and not printed, that's why I have RGB color space. So always keep in mind that if you're using CMYK, that you have the images in CMYK there. Here you can go more into detail to check the fonts, link and images, and then click Package. We have to save the publication one more time, click on Save, and now we have to choose where we want to save it. I want to rename this package with the word package at the end so I know what it is. And here we want to tick Copy Fonts, Copy Linked Graphics, and include an IDML file, which will allow you to open the InDesign file in previous versions of InDesign, not only CC, and include a PDF print. And here we can select the quality that we want to save it in. Click on Package, click OK, and now our file is being prepared. Let's head over here to the desktop. And here we have our original folder and our package folder. So let's see what's in it. We have our two version 3 files, IDML, INDD. We have a PDF file, which is exactly like the one we just exported. We have our document fonts, and we have all of the images that we're using. Something that many designers do in order to send these files to a different designer or to save it for archive is compressing the file. So right-click, compress, and that is it. You can send this zip file through Dropbox or any other file transferring service. And that is it. In the next lesson, we will do a quick recap of everything we learned in this Basics of Print Design course. I'll see you there. Hi there, and welcome to the last part of this course, Basics of Print Design. In this video, we're going to recap everything we've learned. Learning the basics of print design is important if you're starting your career as a designer or you're a seasoned designer. In this course, we covered everything from setting up different files, creating an effective workspace by adjusting your preferences and setting up the structure of a design layout. Making sure you have the right elements set up from the very beginning will only make your job easier as you develop a project. File organization is one of the most important elements, especially if you're working as a freelancer. So we touched on what the essential folders you need to have. We also talked about color swatches and paragraph styles. These two elements can make your job a lot easier, and if you're working with templates, these two are one of the most essentials. Typography is a big topic in design, and we covered a lot of it in this course. We managed to cover the must-know rules that you can apply in your future projects. Working with images in InDesign needs special attention if your file will be printed. So checking them in Photoshop to make sure that you have the highest quality possible will only ensure a smooth printing process. We also covered a few ways to create impact in your layout. Following rules is good practice, but breaking the rules can help you discover new and creative ways to design. So once you're a little bit more comfortable with the rules, try pushing the boundaries little by little so you can also grow as a designer. We wrapped up this course by covering the key elements you need to check when you're exporting a file. and how to package a project for storage. In this course, we gave you many tips that you can take when you're ready to work in a professional studio or as a freelancer that will make your job a lot easier and smoother. From all of us at Envato, thank you for watching this course. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next one.